Hey, welcome back to the show. And joining us today is returning guest Andy Schectman, the president and owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. Andy, how you been? It's been some time.
Yeah, Christian, I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me, man. I hope you're doing well too. And yeah, it's my father always had this analogy that life is like a roll of toilet paper, and when you're young, you don't notice it spinning. Not only is it spinning faster, kind of emblematic of what's happening around us, its time is just kind of blurred by all of the chaos that we see around us. You don't notice how fast it's going. You look back and you say, my goodness, it seemed like New Year's was last night, and we're already, into March. So much like everything since 2020, I don't know, the drum keeps beating faster and faster and faster. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about stuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, wherein how much has changed, not only since COVID, but I was actually looking at some movies from the early 2000s, like pre 2010, and just like, wow, just what a different world, like a different time, like literally, and then how much things have just changed. And in 2020, things have totally just it's a different world.
Totally. 100% it is. And, I think that's kind of the interesting part about everything that we are in, that, you know, um, the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess is what I would say, at least in terms of gold and silver, in that, everything is changing in terms of the global order, in terms of this country, our culture. Everything has changed dramatically. But here we are, 6,000 years after gold and silver were mentioned 700 plus times cumulatively in the Bible. And it's one of the only things that isn't changing. And that is that the most well-informed and well-funded people in the world are once again recognizing what gold and silver are. And it's money, it's wealth. You don't buy it to become wealthy. You own it because it is wealth that has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, everything. And here we are again, as the world seems to be spinning off its axis faster and faster and faster. And you have not only the central banks been buying it at a level no one's ever seen, you now have the most well-informed traders, and I highlight information over wealth, the most well-informed traders on the planet here in New York City in the United States that have been standing for delivery every single month for 16 months at a level no one's ever seen. And that in and of itself is all you need to know, period. We could shut this interview off right now and say that these people don't screw around. These people who are spending billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions every single month for 16 months, which has been completely ignored by the mainstream. Yeah, they've noticed that gold and silver have gotten higher, and they talk about it typically in a negative light, calling silver the devil's metal, and it's overbought, and technically this and blah, blah, blah. They miss the entire story. And that is, the most well-informed and well-funded traders on the planet not only are standing, bringing this all in, having it delivered instead of paper settling, where less than 1% of contracts ever stood for delivery in my whole career. But look at the month of February as a good example. We had somewhere, and I haven't looked at the final delivery numbers, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million ounces of silver came into the COMEX. That's people saying, I don't want paper, I don't want to roll it forward, give me the metal. Which, at $100 or $90 a piece is what, $2.7 billion? That's a small month. But more importantly, okay, 30 million came in, almost 40 million plus left. Over 10 plus million ounces of silver that deliveries can explain alone picked up and left the exchanges, left COMEX. Now, if a mint box of Silver Eagles, Christians, which is 500 ounces, weighs 42 pounds, who in God's green earth is taking possession of about 38 to 40 million ounces of silver that left COMEX? Where did it go? What armada of semi-trucks picked that up and drove it where? Who arranged for the insurance, the logistics, the storage? Why not leave it in COMEX? What's the reason behind that? Just the deliveries in and of themselves in February, which is a non-delivery month, speaks volumes. But I just want people to understand we can make this real simple. Nothing matters. with the exception of the most well-informed and well-financed traders on the planet, going back to 2017, starting with the central banks and now moving to whoever the heck is sophisticated enough to do this here. My guess is it's the Exchange Stabilization Fund on behalf of the U.S. Treasury for national security. Why would I say that? Well, it's a coincidence, of course, that for 16 months we've seen these kind of inflows. And I'm just talking silver right now, but gold has been between 3 and 5 billion a month every month along with it. But in silver, it's a coincidence that we see this for 16 months. And then, oh, by the way, it's now a critical mineral as reclassified by the U.S. government. And by the way, the government are going to put a government-sponsored price floor underneath it. And one last coincidence, we're going to create a strategic stockpile on behalf of the U.S. government. So when you talk about who the hell is doing this, and ask yourself, oh, could it be the U.S. government? Well, the Exchange Stabilization Fund need not tell Congress or anyone for that matter if it's in the guise of national security. What did they just tell us silver was? Critical to national security. Oh, that makes sense. So when you look at price, it is a tool of misdirection. When you see a COMEX jack up margin rates to squeeze out the speculators and then record deliveries and record metal just going bye-bye, leaving the exchange, these are all coincidences, of course, and I think people need to put things in this proper perspective, that the people who are doing this, the money that is doing this, you do not see institutions or individuals or funds with 9 figures in money every single month, which is standing for delivery, which is as unusual as 4 feet of snow in Death Valley in July. And should we have 4 feet of snow in Death Valley this July, I will bet everyone watching this right now $1,000 that we do not see snowmobile dealerships spring up alongside the highway in Death Valley to take advantage of this new weather pattern. It's an anomaly. Same thing that is true here. These deliveries represent an anomaly. Even a bigger anomaly is metal leaving the COMEX market. That's the ultimate indictment of trust, similar to months on end of backwardation that we've seen in COMEX, where these markets never trade in backwardation. They trade in contango. What is contango? The spot price is worth less than the futures price. Why? The further out you go in futures, you have the cost of money, storage, interest, etc. Cost of money. So today you can buy it for X. In a month, it should be X plus 1, X plus 2. As you go further, X plus 3, whatever that is. The further out you go, the more you pay because of the cost of money and interest and storage. But it's been relatively, for the better part of a year, in backwardation, where the market says, nah, I don't trust next month. I don't trust the exchange. I don't trust you. I'm going to pay more. I want it right now. Give it to me now, not into the future. And that's why you see, 10, 12, 15 million more ounces leave than deliveries can explain in and of themselves in February. So crazy times, brother. And I think it's just getting started.
I think you're right. Especially in light of the attacks that started on Saturday, and I presume we're going to continue to see things exacerbated. I think Trump had put something out that I guess or Hegseth or whoever I saw on X, somebody posted that more is to come, and so I presume people are looking for flight to safety. As far as their finances go. What are some other things that you're observing, Andy? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, event that we're seeing in the Middle East, or events, I should say, plural. Et cetera.
Well, I think really what it does is it just, in many respects, adds more fuel to countries' desire to diversify away from the dollar. The weaponization of the dollar, the weaponization of the system. The dollar is no longer trustworthy. And I think that many countries will find reason to continue to, I think, move away from a system that has lost trust, has lost faith. Just the sheer cost of all of this, the damage to the reputation of, I think, of a country that, look, I don't want to comment on war because there's always two sides that will be, one side will be happy and one side will be angry with what I would have to say. But I just simply, war is never good, first and foremost. And the cost of this war is extreme. And once again, it benefits the military industrial complex. And we'd be far better off if we listened to what George Washington said in his farewell speech, and that is to stay the hell out of foreign entanglements, which I wish we did. I truly do. We are a country that has reached its limit in terms of really its solvency, and this just puts us deeper in the hole. We're broke, we're insolvent, we continue to not learn from our mistakes of meddling in foreign entanglements. What was Afghanistan? What was Iraq? But both huge mistakes. You could say the same thing about Vietnam. These wars that we go into ultimately end up causing death and destruction and putting us deeper and deeper and deeper in the hole financially. What am I watching? I'm watching a system crumble right out from underneath us, while there is always the other side where you'll have a lot of people who will say, well, 50 years of, in essence, occupying Iran, where the majority of the people there don't want to be under that regime. Is it for us to go in and make that change? That's really the question. And I'm not the person really qualified to comment on it, other than to say, in this case, it's just another, maybe perhaps, nail in the coffin of the U.S. dollar, of the U.S. hegemony, simply because we can't afford to continue to do these things. And I think a lot of countries will do all they can to distance themselves from this system, and certainly from the dollar, which is being inflated away into the abyss. You look at what this will do with, attacking the largest oil refinery in the world, the Saudi Aramco, and then the cost of higher oil shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. You're talking potential massive inflation. There are consequences when you do these things, and the cost and the value of the dollar, if you're any country around the world and you're looking at trading your goods for a dollar that is going to be inflated away any way you look at it, higher inflation, and really a regime that, I think if you end up on the wrong side of the U.S., well, you better watch it. So quietly you will see, I think, continued diversification away from the dollar. Anyone who would be silly enough to want to hold our dollars, which is akin to a melting ice cube, especially when it's obvious that this is going to be very expensive, I think it's silly. So we'd be far better off to close every military base around the world, bring home all of our troops, make our border impenetrable, and put these folks to work building our infrastructure instead of fighting and waging war around the globe. And I say that with respect. We don't need to continue to do this. We'd be far better off if we just were more mercantilist, which would be focusing on what's happening here instead of globalist around the world, and fixing our problems at home. And while that's probably a pipe dream, it just gets tiring, the never-ending war cycle. So, and I think it's wearing thin on much of the world. Even though there is some nobility from one side of the table, will say, no, this was needed. This was an oppressive, horrible regime that killed its own people and waged terror and war around the world. Okay, fine, I get that, but is it our place to be the ones who go in and clean this up? That's the debate that will go on forever, but most of the wars in my lifetime have turned out to be huge mistakes and tragedies. So let's just hope this one is different this time.
Well, I completely agree with you, Andy, on that front. I as I don't know, I guess I'm fourth generation military. I think we shouldn't be involved in these other affairs out there, and I do find it asinine when I see billionaires and other people on X advocating and lauding the efforts to do regime change and such, and none of their kids are in it. And so I think that's just a classic example of it. And yeah, I think as Doomberg put it, peace is a working capital problem. If you are Raytheon, if you are, North Grumman, etc. I might totally botch that, but you get where I'm coming from. And I also wanted to ask, as it relates to the financial trajectory of things, even geopolitically and or the state of society, conversations that you've been having, Andy. No doubt you have a lot of great contacts, both on and off camera, with people. If you could share whatever you're able to share and feel comfortable sharing, some of the insights or conversations that you're having that perhaps most people aren't, or I guess providing more depth and color to that than most receive.
Well, I'm having lunch with Catherine Austin Fitz on Wednesday. That'll be an interesting one. I wish you were asking me this question on Thursday. Might be easier to answer. But, I mean, look, I think that most of the stuff that I talk about, most people don't talk about. I have to dig throughout websites all across the globe to find these things, even things that are mainstream. Most people aren't following, such as, how many people know that billionaire David Einhorn thinks gold is well on its way to becoming the world's ultimate reserve asset? How many people know that, I have an account with Morgan Stanley, good friend of mine, incredibly successful broker, one of the largest in Florida, manages $4 billion. He has no idea that his chief investment officer just said that the 60-40 platform, stock to bond, that Wall Street has used for 50 years is broken. The chief investment officer said, sell half of your bonds and put the other half into precious metals. That's 20%. How many people know that? Chief investment officer of Morgan Stanley is saying 20% of your assets should be in gold and silver. How many people know that the lead analyst for Bank of America, Michael Hartnett, whose newsletter is in the thousands of dollars per year that goes just to the institutionals, that he said 25% of your assets should be in gold. And now their head metals trader just came out and said silver this year could go from $160 to $309 an ounce based upon a projection of, it has to do with the gold silver ratio, won't go into what, but this just came out yesterday. These are, how many people know that Jeffrey Gundlach, who's known as the bond king, made his fortune selling bonds, the antithesis of gold, something that pays an interest coupon, says 25% in metals is not overweight. We're seeing so many things that would lead one to believe that the mainstream really isn't doing anything to help us, and that the information that I dig up, you have to go well past what we are being told by the mainstream. Like I mentioned, they've completely ignored the story on gold and silver. The only story that matters is who the hell is standing for delivery in an environment where no one ever did. And to this, not only the amount, but month over month over month over month over month over month. Who is it? These are the things that matter. And in terms of inside information, I have nothing that is earth-shattering, other than to say that the people that I respect the most, that are not only very well informed, but spend the time researching, stepping outside the mainstream. If all you did was watch the mainstream, you would have missed this entire rally. You would believe that the road to retirement is only paved with mutual certificates and mutual funds and stock certificates and bonds, only to find out that gold and silver have massively outperformed all of them with no counterparty risk. So that's a fair question. I don't have anything really to report other than to say the most, having conversation like public one. We were talking about it publicly, even with David Bateman, a billionaire, who, said publicly, and I was going back and forth with him, he wanted to spend a few $100 million on pre-65 junk silver. Ended up buying 1,000-ounce bars. This is a billionaire who is openly telling people, and how many people even know who David Bateman is? Sophisticated as hell, smart dude, buying hundreds of millions, if not more, in silver. These are things that are happening right underneath us that people aren't really catching on to. JP Morgan says, and BlackRock, that in this environment, you must own assets, period. That is what they're saying. Things that are being missed by, I think, by the mainstream, by people, which to me, I think make great sense. But it's, to me, the indictment of the entire system is that it's all ignored by the mainstream. So that to me would be it. Just that the biggest money that I know, the most well-informed and connected money that I know is certainly not the poster child for Finance 101. They are moving in a direction that, if you've been watching me long enough, would tell you they're moving in the right direction. If you have been watching the mainstream, you think they're crazy.
No doubt, no doubt. And you mentioned Catherine Austin Fitz earlier, and obviously she's been an advocate of you know, posturing yourself in such a way where you're prepared for what's coming, as well as dispensing a lot of truth bombs as it relates to the powers that be. I know she's been vocal about the CBDCs at some point. Do you presume that is to come sooner, or is that getting delayed? People are just becoming more aware of it. I'm just kind of curious to hear your
Well, I
thoughts on
think,
that.
I mean, the Genius Act would tell us that we are close to, I guess, whatever you want to call it. We're moving towards a situation where we're going to have stablecoins instead of CBDCs. In the interview I did with her recently, she felt that stablecoins might actually be worse than CBDCs because they kind of let people put their guard down. Or a central bank digital currency is administered by the Federal Reserve, whereas a stable coin, in this case, is issued by private enterprise like Tether or banks or whatnot. But there is no verbiage within the legislation that says they are not programmable or they cannot be programmable. So as is, they already, and the plumbing, everything goes in and out of the Treasury. So to think that the feds aren't watching this is silly. It doesn't matter who issues a stablecoin. They're backed by the Genius Act, which goes into effect next year, shows that they're all backed by short-term treasuries, 90-day or less. So we'll go in and out of the U.S. Treasury Department. Will be able to see everything. But not only that, they are already embedded with AML technology, which means anti-money laundering. So where'd you get your money? KYC, know your client. Who are you, Christian? So I need to know who you are, where you got your money, and the kicker, KYT, know your transactions. So once this stuff is all operational, which by next January, by law, it will be, if not sooner, any money that you spend will be via stablecoin and a blockchain network. You'll never write a check out again. You will never send a wire again after next year because it's instant settlement on a blockchain network backed by stablecoins where the interest is not transferable, according to the Clarity Act, but which is another discussion about what I think they're doing, a longer one. But the bottom line here is that she would argue it is a central bank digital currency in stablecoin clothing. It's as bad or worse than a central bank digital currency because you put your guard down, so to speak, and think that it's not being monitored and that there's still privacy. But in her mind, that's not the case at all. You mesh that with the digital ID, digital money. She will tell you that she believes Trump was brought here to usher in the digital surveillance state. That's her opinion, that he was brought here to convince the Republicans, the conservatives, that it's okay to have a digital ID and show them how bad it can be if, with election interference, if we don't have a digital ID for voting to usher it in. And I'll butcher it, but I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said something like, when you give up a liberty in the name of security, you never get it back. And that's kind of what he would be saying in this case, that if, because we say that it's the election system needs a digital ID in order to have integrity, which after the last few elections you might be able to argue that, it also pushes us into a digital surveillance state. Now you add digital money into that, and you are one step closer to that digital prison that people talk about with the CBDC. So whether it be stablecoin issued by private enterprise or a central bank digital currency, in this case, they both run through the plumbing that will kind of keep you locked inside of digital prison walls.
You're making me think of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I'm thinking of now like this um, digital gulag that they want to erect for us all. You're also making me think of the state of society. It's obviously, I think faith in institutions is at an all-time low. Obviously, the Epstein saga, is a continuous. I don't want to say continuous, but I think that has you know ushered in further undermining of the system. Not that it doesn't need under. I mean, the system is certainly in need of reform. That's for sure, and also with respect to the polarization that you see, and we don't have to go into politics or anything like that, but I'm just commenting in that greater polarization that I see, Andy, when I used to bring on different guests who were perhaps more well received, and because of their positions, you see the I guess vitriol, more or less, that they're recipients of now. And so it is. It seems that American society has certainly become more and more polarized.
Yeah, for sure, to say the least. And I used to say under the previous administration, the actions were too stupid to be stupid. You mentioned, the the issues, if you will. It's when you lose trust. You mentioned instant trust, loss of trust in institutions. I would argue it goes deeper in that. Loss of trust in politics and our elected officials and the process by which they are elected. Loss of trust in the judicial system. Is it two-tiered? Loss of trust in all of the things that we saw in the previous administration: election integrity, immigration, lawlessness, a move away from meritocracy into wokeness and lifestyle. All of these things seem to be reversing a bit, but it's created the polarization and the divisiveness that hasn't gone away. The visceral anger and hatred that both sides have for one another, and no better on display than during the State of the Union, where these people forget they're Americans and they don't stand for things that they should stand for, that have nothing to do with President Trump. It's just gotten to a point where that is ripping apart the fabric of this country. What is the first chapter of the Communist Manifesto? Divide and conquer. We're divided, for sure. And I think when you talk about trust in institutions, trust in markets, trust in exchanges that can continue to change the rules, a system that is built on trust runs into big problems when trust is no longer something that is found in abundance. So yeah, it's a bigger problem in and of itself, and trust is a huge problem when everything that we stand for, from being the world reserve currency to having the rule of law, to fair markets and a reserve currency that retains value instead of acting like a melting ice cube, all of these things are being questioned, and rightfully so, across the globe. Look, 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago, and we've racked up close to 200 trillion in debt when you add back into it the unfunded liabilities like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and government military pensions. Ray Dalio just came out with a statement saying that 60% of this country is so far uneducated that their literacy rate is less than that of the 6th grade. 60%. So we're broke, we're insolvent, we're uneducated. We go around the world imposing these laws, or these rules rather, rules-based order that, the moral high ground that we stood on after World War II has been trampled on. So we once were revered and trusted by the entire world. And our currency used to be backed by gold until 1971. So not only were we trusted and revered, but our currency was as good as gold. Things have changed quite a bit. Seems like it's a late stage of an empire that is in decline. And I hate to say that because I'm a patriot. You cut me, I bleed red, white, and blue. This country has done more for me than I could ever ask. And all I can say to you is it's very bothersome. No better dichotomy than, I moved from Minnesota to Florida because of all this stuff. And the difference between the two states is a cross section of what we're talking about right here. And largely Minnesota is actually Republican. You get outside the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul, you'll find that the majority of the people will prefer, the things that the Republican Party will espouse. But you have a huge, huge section of it in Minneapolis that has changed that state into a place I don't recognize really much anymore. And I think that's kind of emblematic of Florida, Minnesota, is what this country has turned into between right and left, and rich and poor, and black and white, and vaccine, no vaccine, and you're defined by who you voted for, and all of these things that we've had to live through and fight with each other about has ripped apart our culture and at the seams. So, it's a sad statement. And I think how that comes back to what I do is that, look, in that environment, if you want to save, if you're not a contrarian right now, chances are you'll be a victim. If you save all of your wealth in dollars, you're going to go broke. And I believe that. And that all of it is related, whether it be economics, politics, social aspects, moral aspects, religious aspects. It's all combined, and it reminds me of the book, The Fourth Turning. And we are in the midst of the fourth turning where, everything is questioned, and you have a revolt, an uprising. The things that made this country special are forgotten about by most people. And here we are trying to figure out a way to deal with it. I find nobility in what President Trump is trying to do. He does it in a manner, and that really is, I guess you could say, less than subtle, and certainly amplified by a media that wants to make him look bad at every turn. So I think if he wasn't here, we'd be in a whole lot more trouble. And I find him talking about bringing back manufacturing, a mercantilism type of, and I don't even know if that's the word mercantilism. I think it is. He wants a mercantile type of environment where we focus on the United States instead of all around the globe. Ultimately, that's what I think they want to do, because if we don't bring back manufacturing, if we don't address the problems that we see in front of us right now, our kids and our grandkids are in very, very, very big trouble. We make nothing. We're broke. We're uneducated. And here comes AI just in time to kneecap all the jobs. So I do believe, and if you've watched any of my podcasts, what he wants to do is grossly devalue the dollar, to, in essence, default on the world reserve status in an effort to reshore manufacturing and sell our products into a world with cheap dollars. And if that is the case, which I do believe it is, because we cannot be reliant on the rest of the world to give us everything from aircraft parts, military components, to aspirin. And we're dead in the water if we do. And the fact that we don't make anything, and AI is going to kneecap 50% of entry-level jobs within the next couple of years, let alone white-collar jobs that will face, like accounting, which will face huge changes because of AI. If we don't do these things, we're in trouble. And I think a lot of the things he is doing really is noble. I just think there's a lot of misinformation and visceral hatred that don't allow people to take a step back and see the policy. They only see a person that they can't stand. And it bothers me, the divisiveness that we have in this country. We should just remember we're all Americans before anything else. And if we stood at that with that in mind, then maybe things would be a lot better. But unfortunately, a long ways away from that. So I sit up here and I try and espouse facts and talk about the good that he is doing, and fully am aware that he could probably do it in a manner that would would create more unity. But we're past the point of pussyfooting around, I guess. If we don't do these things, this country is in very big trouble for the next generation, who will inherit a country wickedly in debt, who will inherit a country that has no way of meaningfully paying it off, that is uneducated and has zero fiscal responsibility. Our standard of living will decline. And I think that it has to be addressed. And that is what he's doing, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether people like it or not. I think we'd be a whole lot worse off if the other administration had retained the White House. And where we're going there is I don't even, it frightens me to even think where we'd be right now if that were the case. So as dark as it seems right now, with another war and another possible regime change that nobody wants, I think that it could be a whole lot worse if the other administration had won, and that's just completely whitewashing our culture and moving on to a different set of rules that I think would our founding fathers would be spinning in their grave if they saw.
No doubt they would. No doubt. I also wanted to ask you before we wrap up, unless there was something else that you'd like to cover, Andy. Um, as you have gotten more and more involved in terms of media, and obviously, I presume this was the path for you, as it was for me, wherein it started off with understanding central banks, who controls these private central banks, what's the power structure in the world. And for me, at least, it's rendered it where much of the different verticals of society, health, education, power, organized religion, et cetera, has been very much obfuscated. And if you care to at all touch on how maybe the past handful of years have changed you in your perception of things, or how you've decided to posture yourself out, even outside of, precious metals and the economic side, if you care to touch on that at all.
I mean, if you haven't been affected by it or look at the world differently, I don't think you've been paying attention. I mean, and so many of the things that we talked about in this industry and were labeled conspiratorialists and nut jobs actually ended up being true. There's a fine line between conspiracy and between reality. And, I'm constantly in search of the truth. I sit up here and I try and help with, actions rather than just words. I have the courage to sit up here and say what I say, but I try to do so respectively. I mean, respectfully. I am a patriot. I thank God every day I was born in this country. I have been horrified by what I saw during the last administration. I am a product of meritocracy. I started in an office the size of a closet 36 years ago and outworked everybody. We've done $15 billion in sales without a customer complaint. I never graduated college. I went there to play baseball and tore up my knee. I wasn't even the best baseball player on my team in high school, but I outworked everybody, and working and outworking and showing up. Meritocracy is what made this country great, along with respect of institution, which when you look at the institution respect that we saw, like we talked about, the judicial, immigration, electoral, light those up in the trash can or during the previous administration. And it's continued to be talked about during this administration. All of these things, if they didn't affect you, where you couldn't have a conversation with people you loved, even at Thanksgiving dinner, turned into a nightmare where, people couldn't even have a conversation. And so they end up learning more and more about less and less till they know everything about nothing. And you ask yourself, how the hell can people think this way? Well, they're asking, how can we think this way? I don't know. I think we've come a long way from where we once were. And I have really talked a lot about everything that wasn't just precious metals over the last couple of years, and because it's important to me, but to do so in a a respectful manner. And it's a difficult line to tread, Christian, but I think
Sure.
all of it plays into the fact of why you need to be a contrarian. And now so more than ever, because what made this country great, what made this country revered around the globe, really isn't so much the case anymore. So you do what you can. You save the world one person at a time, starting with yourself and your immediate family, and you hope that it makes a difference. I hope it makes a difference. I go to bed every night hoping that I am making a difference, and that you can run a business and have pure and great intentions at the same time. I mean, I've done this for so long, and we've had a very successful business. Do I need to do this? No, I don't. I do it because I want to contribute best I can to help people understand where we are in the cycle, the pitfalls of being a dollar bull forever, and thinking that this time will be no different than before. And I guess that's my job. That's your job, and to open people's eyes to reality when the mainstream really has done a poor job of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andy, how can people learn more about you as well as get in touch with you?
The best way would be, well, our YouTube channel is Miles Franklin Media on YouTube. You can go to our website, milesfranklin.com. If you want our price list, which we keep private for various reasons, but we'll be as competitive as anyone in the country. And if you request that at info@milesfranklin.com, along with any questions that you have, we will answer it with no obligation. If you see prices better, as we update this list twice a week, let us know. We will do our best to meet or beat everyone in the country best we can. But we've never had a customer complaint in 36 years, and your listeners, I promise you, will not be the first. So the best way to reach out to us with questions or just to get our price list is info @milesfranklin.com. Let us know that you saw us on this show in the subject line. We'll do the best we can to take very good care of you. No obligation. You just want the price list, do it. And if you want to be contacted, put your phone number down. We will be more than happy to reach out to you. Again, non-obligatory in any respect, just doing the best we can to help people. And that's the best way to find us, Miles Franklin Media on YouTube.
Andy, always a pleasure to have you on and to hear your thoughts. Be well, and
You too, brother.
hope to hear from you here before long, in light of these crazy times that we're in.
Well, count me in anytime, and thanks for doing what you're doing. And I look forward to picking up where we left off, Christian. Until then, stay well, brother.
You as well, and have a great rest of your week, Andy. Thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to like, share, and follow. And I always look forward to hearing your feedback and thoughts. And until next time, take care and be well.